Please join me as I open us with prayer. At Sonlight, we start every morning with prayer, and we try to start every important meeting with prayer as well. So if you'd please join me at home, I'd appreciate that. Dear Jesus, we're so grateful for the opportunity to meet worldwide through the use of computers and equipment. We pray, Lord, against any equipment failure or things that could go wrong. And I do pray, Lord, that you would guide my words, that you would give me things to say that would be words of encouragement for the precious homeschooling moms that are watching on the other end of the screen. Lord, we're grateful for the children that you've given us, and may we bring good into their lives. Help me, Lord, to forget about myself, but may it be, Lord, that you are elevated in this time. And your great name we'll praise, and it's in your name that we pray. Amen. Welcome, welcome. I'm just glad to be able to talk with you virtually. It's hard to know how to look at a camera and say hi, but please know that I want to be speaking to each of you personally. Why a virtual? About a couple of years ago, we were trying to think what we could do where we could celebrate our 20th anniversary. Thought, well, we could bring everybody to Colorado, and we're doing that. But we thought, boy, we have so many people worldwide. How in the world can we meet with them and enjoy time with them and connect with them? And the team at that point came up with the idea of a virtual community, of virtual networking. And it's our first ever, and we're so glad you came and have hung in there with us through the trials and the tribulations of working with multiple programs and doing something brand new. We're just glad you're here. After my talk and after the Q&A, I'd like to do a rebuttal of some of the things that have been said over the course of the day. So during the time when you're putting in your numbers, we'll do a little bit of that. The core giveaway is going to be done at the end of my talk, and this is kind of a bribe to have you stay. And we hope that it'll be somewhat entertaining. So hang in there. As soon as I'm done, we'll have a Q&A time, and I will tell you when to put the numbers in the computer, and then we'll do the giveaway at that point in time. And while I hope all of you would win, I'm afraid it's only going to be one because we need the rest of you to be customers. I'd like to talk about why we should homeschool. And I recognize I'm probably preaching to the choir, at least I hope I am. But you know, I thought even the choir needs to be preached to. We all need to be re-encouraged and continue to move on in the direction that we should. So I'd like to give 4 different reasons of why we should homeschool. The first is it's good for our kids. We all know that homeschoolers test higher on all standardized tests than their public school co-patriots. They test anywhere from 15 to 30% higher. And I actually find that quite compelling because there's a lot of parents that have chosen to homeschool even their special needs children, and of course those are thrown into that mix. So I'm wondering if it's even a little bit higher than the numbers given, but those are proven numbers given by the people who know. And they found that those high test scores are irregardless of the parents' formal education level, so you don't have to be a rocket scientist to homeschool your kids, believe it or not. And it doesn't matter what your socioeconomic group is either. And if you remember when John spoke this morning, he talked about how close to the poverty level we were living when we were beginning to homeschool, and our kids turned out just fine. So it doesn't matter what your income level or your education level is, homeschooling's just good for kids. And if you think about it, we know why that is. If you have a child that's struggling in school, you get them a tutor. You say, oh, get this one-on-one. Well, homeschooling is about as close to tutorial one-on-one as we can find in this world. Typically, homeschoolers test higher on the SAT and the ACT test scores. Those are the scores that all colleges look to for them to do entrance exams for the kids. So it's a good idea to homeschool your kids just so that they can get into the college of their choice. And that was true with my kids. They got into all the colleges they wanted, and it wasn't any kind of an issue. Homeschoolers are actively being recruited by colleges. And if you think about that, that also makes sense. As we think about homeschooled kids, they tend to work a little more independently. They don't need a teacher to rough herd them. They just tend to be people who move at their own pace. In colleges, that's absolutely a requirement for college as well. You don't have a teacher saying, if you don't have your homework in by this time, you're just not going to do very well. So colleges are looking for homeschooled kids as well. The home is a safe place. We hear of school shootings, God forbid that would ever happen, does happen. But beyond that, you can also have kids that are bullied or things that happen that aren't so nice for your kids. I still have scars from 7th grade where the kids were just mean and had a really mean teacher, and things that are said that are just really not so good for the hearts of our kids. At home, that can be a safe place for them to be. We can bend our children toward their strengths. You've seen Luke today multiple times as he's spoken. When he was a boy homeschooled, he spent hours making videos with a friend of his. And when he was trying to figure out what direction he should go to for his college degree, I recommended he look into film, knowing that that was an aptitude and an interest and a love of his life. As homeschooling parents, we can guide and direct because we know very well what our children's giftings and bents are. We can help our children gain our values. One of the things that they found in different studies is that homeschooled kids internalize the values and beliefs of their parents at a very high rate. And I don't know about you, but it's very important to me that my children grasp and hold on to the same values that I hold very dearly. Homeschooling is an opportunity to do that. So homeschooling's good for kids. And I think we all kind of knew that ahead of time. But what I wonder if you thought about is that homeschooling's also good for moms. If you're not using a program where you're plugging your kids into a computer software program or having them set off in a booth somewhere by themselves, if you're somewhat actively involved with your kids, we get to learn along with their kids. I know when I took geometry in high school, I didn't grasp it too well and I didn't understand it very well. But when I did it with Luke, we wrestled it to the ground, and I think I walked away with a much better understanding. And when I go to my folks' house, they always watch Jeopardy! And when I was a kid, I never could answer any of those questions. At this point, I can even answer some Jeopardy! Questions. We get smarter as we teach our children. We also get to enjoy our children at the very best part of the day. If you don't have to get up in the morning and hurry around thinking about what to pack for a school lunch, that's a mercy. If you don't have to help them with homework assignments when they finally drag home from school and they have this backpack of stuff full of confusing workbook sheets, if you don't have to do that with your kids, you're really at an advantage. If you don't have to go out and find fancy clothes so that they fit right in with the rest of the community, glory. I don't know about you, but my kids always did their homework in their pajamas, did their schoolwork in their pajamas, and I think that's about as perfect as you can get. You don't have to get up to an alarm clock. There's something about that jolt that just kind of starts your day off all wrong, and I'm grateful to say we never used an alarm clock when we homeschooled our kids. I think, too, you don't have the exhausted children that you have when you school. After they've been in school all day and they've had to be good and they've had to be quiet and they've had to do things at the teacher's pace and at the teacher's requirement, I think sometimes kids come home and they're just worn out from trying to be good all day. I just think it's better to have kids that are free and easy all day long and can do whatever they enjoy doing at their own pace. And there seems to be studies that show that there are less ADHD kids in the homeschool community. And somehow that makes sense to me as well. I think if you have little boys in particular who have to sit all day and try to be good and keep all that energy under wraps, that there might be some outworking in the inner man that occurs that could encourage ADHD. Could be that for our children's sake in that area as well. We as moms bring them home. Another way it's good for moms is we get a chance to see the lights come on. I don't know about you, but when you finally teach your children to read and they start sounding out phrases and putting words together, there's just a glory that rises up in you of what a neat opportunity you've had to impart wisdom and knowledge into the lives of your kids. Or when they're at a museum somewhere and the docent says something and they know exactly what the answers are. Or they're at a music store and the teacher plays Peter and the Wolf and they say, I know that song. You know, all the things that we've put into our kids, we get to see them when they excel and when they shine. Huge, huge privilege for moms. And it gives us a chance to know our children. I think when they're gone for 6 hours a day and they get home and they want to run off and play and then they have homework, I think as parents we lose an opportunity to get to know and interact with the precious kids God's put into our lives. Kids are a huge blessing, and homeschooling is an ideal way to get to know them and to understand and to love them. I know when I first started, I was very apprehensive about having my children 24/7, and over time, you grow in your ability to, the kids get better at going off and playing for a while so that you have some quiet time. In the beginning, they're kind of hovering because they don't exactly know all the ropes, but over time, you all learn the patterns that work well for your family, and may that be true for your families as well. So homeschooling is good for kids, it's good for moms, it's good for families. I think as you homeschool together, your kids learn to get along with one another. In our family, we have 4 children that are very different from one another. They have the 4 different learning styles. They are as different as night and day. If they had gone off to school and sat in their little classrooms, there's no way in the world they would have been friends with one another or gotten along with one another as adults. But because they were forced to get along in a homeschool environment, that's the only people that were around all day, I think they learned to understand and have compassion one for another, even though they're very different. And I think it's a necessary thing to have our children get along with one another, because you always have meetings with families. You know, if you don't get along with a friend, you just throw them off and you get a new friend. Unfortunately, we're stuck with our families, so it's good to learn to get along with one another. I think this morning John mentioned that Amy would come home from school and things would happen at home. And I think he's right on that. I don't think she was mean-spirited or anything, but all day the kids would be getting along, the 3 younger children would be getting along, and they'd be playing. And she'd come home and things would start to happen. There'd be a little nitpicking or whatever. So when we brought her home, she went from being a relatively sullen, not terribly happy child, and you would never look at her and say, oh my goodness, what a miserable child that is. She just shone in school, she had a million friends, but there was something inside her that was unhappy. And I wonder if it's the picking on that kids get when they're in the school system. Because when she came home, she ended up becoming a huge leader in our family. What John didn't share was, I just don't remember my kids fighting very often. And my daughter Janelle later on said to me, well, Mom, didn't you know Amy used to pull huddles for us kids, and the 4 of them would sit in a circle on the floor in the family room, and Amy would point to one and she'd say, you say your piece. And then that person would talk and she'd point to the next, now you talk, tell your side. And she'd work on reconciliation between the family. Talk about leadership, and that's a skill she learned in the home. May it be that all of our children learn to be peacemakers and interact one with another in ways that bring glory to God's name. I think another way it's good for families is I think you don't have a fear of the teen years. When I read the cartoons, you'll say, oh my goodness, I have a teenager. Oh, the horror. I don't remember anything like that. Someone asked me once, what is it like having teenage children? And I'm here to tell you, it is a huge privilege to see all the things you've put into your kids flower into the great kids that they've become. For years, my kids swam. They swam every day. They went down and swam both competitively and for the fun of it. And when they got to high school, they all won awards in swimming, for an example. That's not all. They won awards in all kinds of things. And I don't remember having issues with the kids were sullen and sneaking behind my back and running against curfew and going out drinking with their buddies. Just the teen years were not scary. And I believe it's because of all the time we put together as a family before that. I think we've communicated significantly through those years. So there's no topic that you can't talk about. There's not, well, Mom, what do you think about this? Well, let's talk about it, because all of these things are symbols of the types of things we've talked about as we've homeschooled. I think, too, we build trust and the right to speak into the lives of our kids if we haven't shuttled them off to a school and left their education and their training to a teacher. I think it allows families to bond. I think there's huge memories of all the books that you sit together and read and enjoy together. I know when the kids were grown, we went on a camping trip, and I said, well, what book should I bring along for us to read? And they all decided we should read Charlotte's Web, which we had read when they were in 1st grade. And we had a great time reading a story again together that we had enjoyed as a family, as young children. Bonding, memories, things we've done together and enjoyed together. Huge, huge privilege. So homeschooling, it's good for kids, it's good for moms, it's good for families, It's good for society. Now, the stats show homeschooled kids participate in local community service more, they vote more, and they attend public meetings more. Boy, doesn't that go against the way of, what about socialization? Our children are confident and know that they can have an impact on society as a result of being home. Homeschooling also produces future leaders. Now, if you think of what a leader is, it's someone who bucks trends. If you've been raised in the school system and you're mocked if you do anything different, what does homeschooling do but allow you to be different and eventually become a leader that you've been created to be? I have the opportunity of interviewing our scholarship winners for the last few years, and they are amazing. They're articulate and sharp and have a dream and a vision, and not one of the dreams and visions is the same. They've all got things that they believe God has called them to do, and they just have a heart and a challenge and a passion to go out and do something for their world and for the glory of God. And I think that's the impressive part of homeschooling. As moms, we can help guide and direct and help our children move into the positions of leaderships that our country and our world needs. Homeschooled kids, stats prove they go to and succeed at college at an equal or a higher rate than public schooled kids. We don't have to be afraid of homeschooling our kids thinking, oh my goodness, they're going to be damaged forever. We can homeschool our children and do an effective job at that. I think, too, one of the things that I think is good for our society is to raise up kids that aren't moving in lockstep with all their friends. But may we raise up kids that say it's okay to be different. I didn't go to a regular school, and it's okay. It's okay. It's okay to be different. May it be that we have kids that take a stand for the things that are important, take a stand for the things of God, because they haven't gone through a traditional form of education. I have a great quote here. It says, Dr. Gary Knowles of the University of Michigan, he explored adults who were homeschooled. None were unemployed and none were on welfare. 94% said home education prepared them to be independent persons. 79% said it helped them interact with individuals from different levels of society, and they strongly supported the home education method. In conclusion, I'd like to read a postcard that we sent out years ago to our customers. On the cover of it, there was a gorgeous picture of Stonehenge, and it said, "The top 12 reasons to homeschool your children." And I'd like to read that and share with you that for your encouragement. To instill your values and beliefs in your children, to speak to and meet your children's unique individual needs, to help your children through the difficult times in their lives, to help your children understand the hard questions we face in life, to build intimate and meaningful relationships with your children, to daily show your children how much you love them, to share with your children the common everyday joys of life, to be there when your children need you most, to be your children's mentor, spiritual leader, role model, friend, and teacher, to protect your children from the negative influences they may encounter outside the home, to instill in your children a lifelong love for learning, to show your children that learning is not boring, but exciting. That's the 12 we chose, and I'm sure if you thought about it, you could come up with other reasons of why homeschooling has been good for your family. May it be that we remember and cherish these years that we have together. If you're not homeschooling and you're watching this tape, may I recommend you try it and do it. It is a viable option. And for those of you who are homeschooling your children, carry on, good and faithful servant, and one day may you reap great reward. Thanks. May it be that you have a terrific time, and it won't start off easy. Oh, how did I combine my kids? Actually, I started with the highest level, and they all had to just hang in there. So Justin, of course, probably got the short end of the shrift, but he turned out just fine. strategies for starting. Some of these questions I'm going to leave for our advisors to come back on. I always did just 36 weeks of school just because when I was done, I was tired and I needed a break, and I felt like it was good for all of us to take a break. Could Sonlight focus on how to teach specific learning styles? I'm of the opinion that if you just read together, all the learning styles work. For the children that are the A type that just need immediate response and immediate rewards, for Justin, I used to just sit next to him and say, okay, you finished that problem, now do the next one. And you may not eat lunch until you finished your schoolwork. For some of the kids, if they didn't get their seat work done, we did seat work from 8 until 10, and then we did our reading together from 10 till noon. Any seat work they didn't get done by 10, they had to do on their own time because I was done at noon. So that was how we did it in our family, and they actually learned good work ethics from that because they figure if they're done at 10, they have the rest of the day free, which is perfect. Done with school. How do you motivate a child? Well, like I just said, what we did was we would do our seat work from 8 till 10, and then we would read. And reading, of course, is the best and funnest time of the day and something we all looked forward to. In fact, we probably, if we went over, was because we couldn't bear to put a book down, so we'd read a little longer. But anything that child didn't have done, they had to get done before they could go and play. That seemed to work pretty well for them. Yeah, short day, good to hear. I'm an advocate for that. When do you know if you're trying to do too much or too little? Probably when the kids start crying. No. I think we need to hold our children to a high standard, but I do think we don't want to press the little ones. I think I'm an advocate for letting little children be little children, so I'm not huge on teaching your children to read by 3. Some kids do just kind of automatically, but to do flashcards and drills, and don't do any of that at all. Particularly for boys, they tend to learn to read a little later, so I would try it, see how it's going. If there's a lot of, I can remember one of my children would just sweat. He was working so hard on learning how to read. It was just an effort, and you do that for a while, and you trade off lines, and you speak encouragement to them, and you lighten up a little. Go with easier materials for reading. Reading, particularly for boys, can be tough. Did I ever come up with a course for children with autism? I have not. We do have a forum that is specifically for people with special needs. I would go there and post because there's going to be someone in the same camp as you, and we'll have all kinds of wonderful and great input in that arena. The main thing for younger children, I think, is just read. Study after study after study shows that academics are totally based on how much kids read and love books, and you can almost tell by the amount of vocabulary that kids have at age 2 or 3 how they're going to do in school forever. So what you want to do with toddlers and preschoolers is just get great picture books and read and read and read. I'm thinking when our kids were little, we'd go to the library and pick up 50 books at a time, and just every evening, John, I think, spent an hour reading with the kids, and those are precious memories of John on the couch with all 4 kids with their teeth brushed and their pajamas on, and they would just read for an hour and then they'd go to bed. Precious, precious times. But I think the vocabulary and the listening skills and the ability to put stories together, that's all just part of that magical, and they don't exactly know, but every indicator says reading is so important for education. Somebody says, do you think kids actually hear you when they're not paying attention? Absolutely. If you have a great story, you can't keep them away from them. So my kids always played with Legos and did something quiet. They were not allowed to be, and I don't think they ever wanted to be noisy. They wanted to hear the story. But they would just build things and fiddle around on the floor, and I just kept right on reading, and at the end they'd be able to answer every question. So yes, they absolutely do hear what you're saying. Favorite read aloud? Well, my all-time favorite books of all are the Narnia series from C.S. Lewis. When I was a kid, I read them twice a year from probably 5th grade until I finally grew up. so I still love them. So probably my favorite read aloud is The Horse and His Boy. Somebody asked, how necessary is it for Dad to read? It's a good question. One of the things we talk about in our catalog is how families whose dad never read to the kids sometimes got hooked in by hearing the mom read. I can remember reading to my kids, it's a 5th grade book, and I can't think of what it's called, but it's a very exciting, Wolves of Willoughby Chase. And of course the story is enthusiastic and loud and exciting, and John came running in from the office and said, "What are you reading?" I think if we can share some of our passion for the joy and the enthusiasm and the great things that can happen when we read, I think sometimes dads get hooked in. If you can start them off with little picture books, if they're not comfortable doing that, there is something about dads and kids that, boy, just needs to be built into our families, where I think kids just so desire to be with Dad and to hear from him and hear words of encouragement from him. If we can build kind of unit time with Dad that's non-confrontational, I think that's probably a good thing. Because Sonlight was originally designed to care for people who live in other countries, people who are on the field trying to talk about Christ to other people, or people who live overseas for a variety of reasons. We didn't want to just do American history every year, which was kind of the model at the current time. Sonlight's been around 20 years. Things have changed a little, but that was the model at the time, where you did a little bit of American history. Maybe one year you'd study the Indians, and the next year you'd study the Pilgrims, and the next year, kind of a unit study, strange approach. At Sonlight, our goal was to do much more world history, look at the big picture, get the full line of history. And I think the 4-year program does that as well, but I also wanted to focus on American history. So when we do American history, we really, really do it, which if you're doing a 4-year plan, that doesn't work as well. Let's see. Canadian history options. I wonder if there's a forum that would talk about that. We have tossed that around for years, and partially the difficulty for me is finding Canadian readers. I think we could easily find a good Canadian history book, but so far that's been the stymie for me. Because I'm not as aware of the Canadian publishing houses, that's tougher. How do you manage reading 3 books to 3 children? I probably wouldn't do 3 cores with 3 children. Like I said, when my kids were little, I did 1 core, and I did it to the oldest, and all the other ones kind of hung in there, and they're plenty smart enough. I would pick a core that is of interest to you, maybe one that's in between, because I think over the years, probably Sonlight's gotten a little more challenging. It's always been very robust, but pick one that's in the middle and do it for both age groups. I think you'll find that the oldest will still be challenged and the youngest will not be. The oldest, yes, that's what I want to say, I think. Would you do 2 cores? If I did 2 cores, I would do the history and the read-alouds from the one that had interest to me, and do the history and save the read-aloud books for the summer. Seems like there's always a need for more books to read as a family, particularly if you can do the older, because once you get to 3rd grade on up, all the books are linked together. I might do that one as the one I do because it's all part and parcel of one thing, and save the books from the other for the summertime. The whole reading industry is in a state of flux. Think iPad, and we're just trying to figure out how we should deal with that as well. Electronic IG would support missionaries. It's just not as easy to do because of the charts and the graphs, but it is on our radar. Somebody says, do you take longer than a year to do a core? A lot of our customers do. I didn't, just because I'm a book checker. I wanted to get it all done, and we just did. So we just worked really hard. So if you had a week when there was a holiday, you just did more on Tuesday, which kind of takes care of taking a vacation, but it works.